Okay, good afternoon all. Recently on one of the news shows, Nancy Pelosi was there, and one of the things that she said is elections about the future. And I so agree with her. The past is the past, and the objective of the Chamber's forum today is not to rehash old history, but to look to the future. The decisions made by the current and former board are past history. Let's leave it at that. We all need to move on, please. Our questions reflect some of the concerns of the business industry, that all-important industry that creates jobs and pads the general budget. The questions were formulated with the help of the Carson City Chamber Board of Directors. None of them has seen this. The only people who have seen the questions, and they've only seen half of the questions, are our moderators today. And with that, that's Bob Moran, who's with Western Nevada College. I really appreciate you being here, Bob. And he has 3 questions that he will be asking you. And then the other is Kirk Carraway, who is a publisher and owner of carsonnow.org, where, again, you will be able to see this live. Oh, you're seeing it live, actually. Or if you weren't listening, you can review it again. Today's event is being televised live and will be replayed, as I said, and it will also be on our Facebook page as a service of your chamber. Before we begin, we wish to thank each of you, our candidates, for the gentlemanly way in which you have been conducting your respective races. We like to think that each of you is what makes America and our community great. We thank the candidates for coming out to yet another one of these forums. Hopefully it will be your last. There will not be formal opening or closing remarks. For if you don't know these guys now, you never shall. So, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. And of course, the Nevada Appeal has been doing a great job in allowing you to know their biographies. We'll go straight to the questions. We'll begin in random order, as we did in our primary forum. Please answer the questions directly, and let's keep it to thinking about the future. The moderators have already been under the threat of death to keep you on track. I'd like to now, without further ado, introduce the candidates. From my right is Chris Carver, who is running for mayor. And of course, we know Robert Crowell, who has been the mayor and wishes to continue to be mayor. And then to my left right here is Supervisor, who's running again for Supervisor Ward 2, is Brad Bonkowski, who we just learned is a great baker. And then we have Maurice White. And then supervisors for Ward 4 is we have John Barrett. And then at the end, last but not least, is Jim Shirk. Candidates, because I know it is so hard, if I were in your shoes, to keep the questions correct in my mind, I'm giving you each a card that has the question on it as it will be read. And for you and the
tax incentives for businesses to locate or remain in Carson City. Most of the businesses receiving the incentives were large corporations. With the current emphasis on attracting more small, unique businesses to our community and to the downtown, do you feel that the city should be providing incentives, tax or otherwise, to attract new businesses who would create less overall sales tax revenues and jobs, but add to the quality of life and ambiance so needed in the downtown core? So 2 minutes for each candidate to respond, and we start with Brad, please.
Thank you for that question. Well, I think that we've seen mixed result with incentives for businesses to stay here in Carson City or to expand. I don't think that providing cash incentives to small businesses to move in downtown would be helpful. I think that the city would probably go in the hole, and I'm not sure how helpful it'd actually be to the businesses. I think that other incentives, for instance, the facade improvement program that we've instituted, is a much better incentive for businesses to locate downtown because the property owner gets a direct benefit in increased value to their property, which they can pass on to the tenant, or which creates a more business-friendly and attractive environment for tenants downtown to do business. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maurice, same question, please.
Investing taxpayers' money in private business is bad public policy and should never happen, whether it's a big business or a small business. Regardless of the results that can be ascertained, it's bad public policy.
Well, never say never, but
Excuse me, the next one on the docket here is going to be Bob.
Oh. Well, first of all, let me just say that as a general rule, I think that incentives should be in the form of infrastructure incentives if we're going to go down that road. Now, we have had examples of successful incentives in Carson City, particularly with our car dealers. And I think that, without the car dealers, we might not have made it through the recession as well as we did and maintain our quality of life. At least one car dealer is 2% of the general fund, 8% of all sales tax receipts, and that's just one car dealer. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind. Those are existing contracts, however. And I, as part of the infrastructure improvements, I do believe that the facade improvement program is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of infrastructure improvements. I think it's also important to remember that when I first became mayor, there was a program in place that would give individual grants to individual businesses. That was turned off some time ago. We now have a much broader or a broader incentive regulation that is reviewed every time something comes up like this for an incentive. It's reviewed by the the Citizens Redevelopment Authority, which I think operates extremely well. So I think that, as a general rule, as I said, I think infrastructure grants are important for quality of life. I think grants that we've given in the past, even though some of the grants outside of the car dealers I questioned, but I think that it's important to remember that without some of those grants and without the business activity that was created by those grants, our quality of life might have suffered more than what we've already had to put up with during the Great Recession that we're hopefully now moving out of. So let me just say that time, done.
Strict taskmaster.
You got it. That's all right. 2 minutes goes by quick, man. That's all right.
Chris, the same question, please.
I think that the incentive programs that we've offered in the past have been not planned out well. When we look at where the money has gone and the return on the investment, it certainly has helped those businesses grow and prosper in hard times that we all went through. But they last too long, and we now have to look to other places in order to encourage more businesses to come in here. And we know that the automobile industry is profitable. And I would like to use incentives to bring that same kind of corporate sponsorship. At the smaller mom and pop level where we have more diversification and more risk, there's a reason why lending institutions, as you well know, have problems giving small businesses like that money because you don't often have a guaranteed return on investment. So I would still like to see us use the same kind of model where we have a tax incentive based on profitability, but I would like to see definitely the city become less involved in the free market and certainly less involved in trying to tinker with what's going to be successful, whether it's downtown or any place else in Carson City. That belongs almost entirely to the private sector. We should provide a level playing field. And to an industry, everybody talked about the lack of infrastructure or the lack of effective infrastructure from broadband to pavement. And that's where we need to focus our resources. Thank you.
Thank you. John, your turn, please.
Thank you. As I started to say never, but I generally agree that it's not a good idea to throw tax dollars at people to bring them to town or get them up and running. Private sector is the private sector, and that's the way it should work in the best of all worlds. I tend to agree that facade improvement and infrastructure and the great quality of life here should bring people in or make them want to stay if we have a good climate, and we do have a good business climate here, I think. I do have a quarrel with the question slightly because it says that create tax, sales tax and jobs, but add to quality of life, not create. What you're talking about here in smaller firms is actually the growth engine of the United States of America. Big firms are great. We're glad to have them. We want more to come. And that's what NNAA and other outfits like Nevada Business Connections do. They lure them in. And we want them here. Industry is a great thing. I think that we can help smaller ones along with the kinds of things we've talked about already. And they will grow slowly, but they will grow and make our quality of life a lot better, but they will create jobs. So I don't cotton to that assumption.
Thank you. Jim?
Good afternoon. The idea of the economy growing can only happen when individuals and businesses successfully recognize what they can do on their market and their opportunities. I think the risk involved pursuing these opportunities would be in the private sector. It should not be up to the city government to lure businesses here. We could have somebody subsidize an organization to help bring businesses here. We could work also with the governor's team that brings businesses here. I think we need a better connection with the governor. We need somebody out in front who's dedicated to bringing businesses and the marketing here. We have to market our own community as well. The quality of life will actually attract more businesses, more individuals, and present more opportunities down the road. The taxpayers' money is collected and held in the redevelopment. That's where the funding should come from for business opportunities. And I think we can do our part, city government, by overseeing how the redevelopment is moving forward. I don't know necessarily if we should spend money on the downtown core to bring businesses here. I think that's going to be an individual person's or business decision if they want to relocate down there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now that concludes the answers to the first question. I'll move on to question number 2.
All right, then question number 2. Water issues remain at the forefront of most business budgets. As we continue to add new housing units and businesses such as marijuana growing facilities, do you feel there could be a better way to meet current and future water needs without continuing to annually raise rates or taxes? And please explain your answer. And the new order for this one starts with Bob.
Well, thank you very much for this question, because I think there's a lot of confusion that exists out there about water rates, and what we have. And I see it daily. So just a little bit of history. We have about just over 18,000 acre feet of water in Carson City. We are using just between 50 and 60% of that right now. Just between 50 and 60% of that right now. There's a concern that we're buying water from the town of Minden to meet our demands here in Carson City. That is not true. We were faced with a problem of meeting the Safe Drinking Water Act about 5 years ago because we were cited by the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection, which also enforces the federal Safe Drinking Water Act. As a result, we had arsenic in our water on the east side, and arsenic on the uranium on the west side, and arsenic on the east side. As a result, we were faced with the decision: do you build an arsenic and uranium treatment plant, or do you do some other mechanism to blend and knock down the amount of particulate matter in your water so that you do meet safe drinking water standards? We chose the blending mechanism, which saved us about $6 million over time. And it saved us from having to build a uranium and arsenic treatment plant. We did that by buying 1,250 acre-feet of water from the town of Minden, which was being unused and which they were in danger of losing. We bought that. At the same time, we had, Carson City here, right here, Carson City had 2,000 acre-feet of water rights in the town of Minden area that we were not using. We couldn't get anything, couldn't get it to us. So we built a pipeline from the town of Minden past Indian Hills to Carson City to use clean water out of Minden to blend, and we've done, to do that, we now meet state and federal safe drinking water standards. That's why we're getting water out of the town of Minden. It's not to supplement because we need the water. It's because we're using it to blend. Granted, there's additional water rights that we got our hands on that were not on the books, 2,000 acre-feet of water that we didn't have before, but we owned, but we couldn't get it to us, and 1,250 acre-feet of water that we bought from the town of Minden as part of the transaction to get clean water from the Minden area up here. And by the way, that saved Indian Hills as well.
Okay, thank you. Next, Chris?
So, I agree that we have plenty of water. I don't believe that we have a mechanism in place where we can afford it. And singling out the marijuana industry is probably not the best example because with the use of hydroponics, they're probably not going to be a major water consumer throughout the city. The decision to pipe the water in from Minden to make our water safe to drink was, in my mind, not a strategically sound decision. We need to relook that arrangement because we've decided that we're going to fight with Douglas County on the rate imposition, and that means to the average household roughly a 59% increase over 6 years if the rate continues to be imposed as it's currently scheduled. So while we have access to the water, we may not be able to afford our own future, and we certainly don't have control over our destiny. And that it is the responsibility of the city government, and we've done a poor job looking 5, 10 to 20 years out and protecting not only what we have, but where we're going as we move down the road. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. Thank you.
Okay. Next, Jim?
There are a couple of issues with the water. First off, I believe there is a major issue with Douglas over water. We're in negotiations or going back to the table to renegotiate or look at this or litigation against them over the rates. So for the water line to come through, I think there's some misgivings over it at this juncture. Maybe it'll come out in the long run on the good side. I'm not sure about that. As for the marijuana, going back to that, I voted against the marijuana establishment opening here because I believe we should have had one open, and then after a period of time, the second one should open, so we could work out the kinks with that. And if the forefront of most businesses is the water budget coming here, I think we also need to look at the hookup rates for new businesses coming here. They're extremely low when we've put them back to, I think it was 2005 rates, and we've hardly even raised them as we've come forward. But the citizens' rates have gone up astronomically for water and sewer fees. But the hookup rates, I believe, still remain relatively low. And as for the growth of the city itself, the master plan actually oversees how we're going to grow, and that should be also weighed in on the water, and it is, because we cannot grow according to the master plan if we don't have the water, and that's all tied together. However, the master plan and other similar plans should be revisited occasionally, like every 7 years, not the length of time we've gone so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is John.
Well, thank you, Jim. I believe it's the last forum where I said the master plan should be revisited every 7 years. Regarding the downtown and the process of the master plan, it's true. We should follow the master plan as well as we can, and the master plan put the downtown project in it more than a decade ago, or about a decade ago. The vetting was done before that. Regarding the water situation, a shout out should go to Dorothy Timian Palmer, who used to work for city government here, now is the head of Vidler Water Company and here in town. And she has provided us by buying up water rights through the 90s, I believe, and early in this century, water rights that give us an adequate underpinning. Regarding Minden, that's our water. That's just the way it is. It's our water. We will have to negotiate. Believe me, folks, in the long haul, I'll interrupt here and say I covered water in another incarnation of my work life for a major newspaper at one time in another state. Water is going to go up. We will have to negotiate. We will have to fight tooth and nail to make sure that we can keep our water from going higher. It's going to go higher everywhere unless there's a breakthrough in the technology of desalination.
Okay, thank you. Next, Maurice.
So just like everybody has stated, we do have the water for today, as long as we don't get into a worse drought that we're already in. Our east-west water line projects are nearly finished so that we can start blending our water so that we can use all the water that's actually available in this basin. And that will also give us the ability to backfeed into different areas of the town. There are several zones here in town, and so if something happens in one of those zones, we need to be able to get water into those. So our water system's actually in pretty good shape. What we really need to do is make sure that our water rates are stable and don't outrun inflation. Whether you're watering your lawn or you're manufacturing something, you need to know, have a pretty good idea that your water rates, all your utility rates, are really going to be stable. One of the things we have to keep in mind is our water consultant that we pay good money to has said we should not attract large water users. So we have to keep that in mind. Also, I think we need to actually take a look at the growth ordinance that Carson City has. They've set a schedule with residential permits that will put us at our population cap of about 80,000 people in just about 30 years if we stay on the target that they're running now. Can we have the infrastructure in place to supply 80,000 people with water? That's the question that has to be answered.
Okay, and last, Brad.
Well, I think what you've heard up here covers the majority of this topic. Bob covered a lot of the logistics. I agree with John that we owe a real debt to Dorothy Timian Palmer back in the early 80s. She put in place a plan that Carson City followed that ensured that we have water for build-out. And not only do we have the water rights, but we actually have wet, accessible, and available water. So Carson actually is in better position with water than anybody else in the entire state. One of the things I'd like to mention is that the water rates that we have in place and the connection fees are for two different items. Connection fees only address the improvements to the water system that to cover the impact based on whoever is connecting to the system. So if a manufacturer comes in and they have to connect to our system, there's an impact. That connection fee is supposed to cover that cost. The rates are for the operation of the systems and for the capital improvements to the systems. So when we revisited the water and sewer rates, what we found was that the rates that we were collecting did not even cover the cost of operations, let alone set aside money for replacements and repairs. So we looked at the impact of every user class in the system and the rate system and the improvements needed to our facilities going forward. We have a 20-year plan, and we came up with rates that will now cover the operations and will set aside the reserves that we need to make the improvements that we need to make to the facilities when we need to make them. We didn't want to hit the public with that rate increase overnight because it was a significant increase, so it was phased in over 5 years.
All right, thank you. That's enough of the question about water. Over to Bob.
Thank you very much. Now we're moving on to the third question, and again, it will be 2 minutes for response for each candidate. And here's the question. Now that the dream of a new downtown has finally been reimagined, the long talked about new animal shelter is operational, and the much-awaited multi-use athletic center has been built thanks to the 1/8 cent sales tax increase. What do you see are the future needs that must be met to make this a more livable community, and how do you propose the funding will be forthcoming? This time, we'll start with John in an answer, please.
Actually, again, this question has a hole in it. The fact of the matter is there's more into that 1/8 of cent. It'll buy some improvement in the other business corridors as well as the downtown. And it will hopefully buy new seats for the Bob Boldrick Theater and other upgrades to the culture we can put in that great place. The seats were put in there in 1970 and they need to be changed. But looking forward, there are many things we could talk about because any city has needs that outstrip revenue. So it'll be tough to do. I would propose going to the people and asking them in a series of meetings that could be done at the same time we redid our master plan. We need that done. Had we done that, if people hadn't wanted the downtown after 7 years, it could have been stripped out. I don't think it would have been, but other things could have been put in, and that's the way to find out what we need in the future. I'm certainly not going to sit here and impose on Carson City my dreams or what I think is wonderful. I like the downtown in part because I'm a mountain biker and I like to ride down, but I'm not going to ride on Carson Street until now, or soon, let's put it that way. But there are a lot of things that we can do to make this community even better than it is. It's a great community now. We could talk about more convention facilities, and I know Ronnie loves to talk about that. If the Ormsby House opens, then we'd be in good shape there. We could talk about more sporting facilities than just the MAC. We have pretty good MAC, and we have pretty good outdoor recreational facilities and great trails. But we can continue to improve those because they're a great lure to get people to come to Carson City. Those are things that I would love. I want to do...
2 minutes up.
Thank you.
We move on with the same question. Jim?
Yes, this brings up the 1/8 of a cent sales tax, and I think it was wrong to do from the very beginning, to impose this upon citizens and not give you the right. Also, taking that money and narrowing the street, I think that was wrong. We should have used redevelopment funding, not taxed you, the citizens. And as to the animal shelter and the multi-use athletic center, I think that was wrong to use that money there. That's double taxing you, the citizens. Here's the reason why. The multi-purpose athletic center was funded through the Question 18. So we created another tax, double taxing you to build this, then we're going to charge you the entrance fee. The animal shelter should have came from the city budget. You pay revenue, you pay taxes, you pay property taxes. That's where that funding should come from. It shouldn't come from you, the citizens, to facilitate the funds to build city buildings. That's wrong. And as to how we can make use of the funding to go forward, it's the quality of life that's the number one issue here. You want to attract businesses here, quality of life. You want to have a better quality of life, have more revenue stream come in. Ask the Visitors Bureau, they just hired someone. That's going to change. You're going to see the dynamics of the Visitors Bureau change overnight here shortly. Also, the art and culture. You want to see more visitors come here? Put that in tandem with the Visitors Bureau, and you're going to see a prosperous community come forward. But as to where we're at today, Carson City has always been a great community. I love Carson City. It's my tagline, and I stand by it. It's a great community, but what we've done in some respect is not really planned ahead, because now we have downtown, we're saying, well, we need to attract businesses there. Well, we should have put that in place before we narrowed the street and before we have them the ribbon cutting. We should have had businesses at least interviewed them to come here. If we do this, will you come?
Thank you, Jim. That's the 2-minute marker. Maurice?
We can only move forward if we understand what our past is. So I believe to move forward, we have to completely restructure how we operate our capital improvement and our maintenance programs. We have $6.8 million in capital improvement requests that are not funded, and yet we spend $11 million downtown on a project that my opponent and the Chamber of Commerce have called a gamble. We're told that this is to attract businesses. Well, I happen to think Carson City is already business attractive already, because from 2013 to March of 2015, we had 1,400 brand-new business licenses issued in Carson City. So I believe we are wasting money on ill-conceived and poorly planned projects, and I think that's where we can get the money. The downtown gamble at $11 million. 2015 saw 7 projects that, in my opinion, wasted $286,000 in rebids and change orders. The Amoresco contract, you have to go to the city's website to figure that out, $8.4 million of wasted money. Probably $710,000 on a conservation easement for the old Woods Ranch to pay people to continue doing nothing with a piece of property they're doing nothing with. All of this, while the fire chief has said his emergency response resources have exceeded their limits. The open space manager has said that everything that's needed cannot be completed with available staff and financial resources. I just showed you where there's somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 or $15 million that's been wasted, in my opinion. That's where we can finance the future growth and livability of Carson City, which is actually pretty good right now.
Brad, your turn, please.
So at the beginning of this forum, we were directed or asked to directly answer the question. So the question in this case is, what do you see as the future needs that must be met to make this a more livable community, and how do you propose the funding? So I'll answer that question. First, roads. That's the biggest issue facing Carson City. It's a question or an issue that we can't solve on our own. We're going to have help from the federal government. This is actually a federal issue, and it affects every city, county, state in the nation. We currently have on the ballot a question about gas tax indexing. If that passes, that will help alleviate some of the road issues, because it will provide some revenue for us to maintain and repair and replace some of our roads. If it doesn't pass, then we'll continue with business as we have, and we don't have anywhere near enough revenue to address roads. Asset management program, we're working on that now. So within the next 3 or 4 years, we will have a comprehensive asset management plan in place, so that we will know what assets we own, we'll know the condition of those assets, we'll know when repairs and replacements need to be made, and we'll know exactly how much we need to fund that. I believe that we can fund that through a transfer of existing property tax collected from the general fund. One of the other main issues that we're going to have to address is our storm drainage system. We've dealt with our water and sewer facilities, but we have not dealt with our storm drain system. So that's another issue that we're going to have to deal with. And then finally, for quality of life issues, I think that we need to continue to work on our outdoor recreational tourism. We have a world-class trail system. This is what we do best, is outdoor recreation. And this is what we need to promote for Carson City. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
I have to tell you, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when I hear candidates or those in office talk about luring business and luring tourists to come to Carson City. We have a great quality of life. That's where our investment goes. If the dream of the downtown has been realized, then we need to continue to invest in that aspect of our city, because we have a responsibility as the capital city for our state. The operational costs for the animal shelter cannot help but go up. We budgeted the $700,000 a year to provide the services that were in existence at the time. We now have a facility that's roughly 4 or 5 times what it used to be, with a surgical suite, requires a veterinarian, etc. No 501 on the planet is going to absorb that cost willingly. So we have to figure out where that money is going to come from. And the multipurpose athletic center that's associated with question 18 is still not the community gym that our residents had voted for back when they voted for the question. So it needs showers, it needs ball courts, it needs a weight facility, it needs the things that our community wants for indoor recreational activity, especially during our winter. So the answer is, or the question is where do you get the money? And I think we need to start with where we spend it in city government. And right now, our city staff is growing to accommodate some of these ideas that Mr. Bonkowski just spoke about, but we have yet to achieve efficiencies with automation, shared workspace, and collaborative drafts for policy building. We are not focused on providing essential services to the number one asset in our city, which are the people that live here. Our residents should be our first and primary concern for everything. The neighborhoods where we live, the streets where we drive to and from work and we send our kids to school. That has to be our priority. And every dime that we spend on something that is not that is money wasted, in my view.
That would be 2 minutes. Thank you. Bob?
Well, on items and projects that are out there in the future, let me just say, mention a few of them. First, we've already talked about the community center, and I think that we need to make sure that, part of the funding of the community center in terms of seats, in terms of enlarging the stage area so that we can accommodate things that the Western Nevada Theater puts on, which are really wonderful. I think we need to find some ways to do those. And I don't have an answer to that right now, but I think we need to, other than what we've set aside and allocated out of the eighth of a percent. Also, I think we need to keep our eye on a library, because our existing library, no matter what happened in the past here, our existing library is becoming more and has been more of a community asset than most libraries in most communities. It is now part of the workforce development, and it's definitely overcrowded, and it has a lot of use. And so I think we need to keep a library, some way expanding it or something of that nature, on our radar screen. I also think that with the end of the waste management contract, the franchise that comes up in 2019, that we'll have to be looking at different ways. We'll be putting that out to consideration in an RFP and stuff like that. But I think the community will have to have a discussion about how far we want to go down the road on recycling. There's a lot of talk about single stream recycling, which in one sense is a very good way of going about it. But the other side of that is that we need to make single stream recycling, if you're going to make it work, requires mandatory curbside disposal, which, those are issues. And it also probably means a rate increase in terms of making it work. But I think that we have to look at recycling techniques, and maybe it won't, maybe we can do all these things without having any increase and without having mandatory curbside recycling. I don't know, but we need to keep our eye on that for the future of our community. Also, I think we need to keep...
That would be 2 minutes.
2 minutes, done.
With that, I'll toss it on over to my partner, Kirk, for the next question.
Okay. So, question number 4. The condition of our roads speaks volumes about the economic prosperity of our city. Now that the roads and the infrastructure in parts of the downtown have been completed and South Carson Street has been repaved by NDOT, we are looking rather prosperous. What do you propose be done about aging infrastructure and roads in the rest of the city not adequately kept up due to deferred maintenance? How do you propose these needed repairs be funded should the gas indexing tax be defeated? And we're going to start this round with Maurice.
So actually, it goes directly right back to the $6.8 million in unfunded capital improvement projects that we have. It comes from, we can fund the things that we need to do by not wasting our money willy-nilly. We have a situation where the director of the finance department has issued a letter that says she has concerns about constraints over not being able to collect as much property tax as we need to have set by the current rate. So while we do understand there are problems throughout the entire city, targeting specific pet projects is not the way to go about it. Yes, indeed, the downtown project is completed, and that project was completed at the same time that our 2040 traffic plan says that by 2040, we will have a 40% increase in vehicle miles traveled in our area. So why are we considering narrowing any streets? We've been told over and over that we should not, based on actual facts and not what we feel we want to have in the future.
Okay, next up, John.
Well, if the 3 cents fails, we're pretty much behind the 8 ball, but we will go on seeking revenues to fix the streets. The dirty little secret, which really isn't secret, is that we have way more road problems than we can fund. We get in about $1 million that we can use, and we need $3.5 million, according to Mr. Bonkowski, who is the head of the Regional Transportation Commission. Actually, I said at one point months ago, we needed the entire city budget to fix the roads in a timely fashion. What happens is the streets are failing at a rate that's too fast because the construction price for roads and streets goes up 3 to 5 times the amount of regular inflation. If we let them continue to deteriorate, we're in big trouble. So I would work with my colleagues to try and find some way to get a penny or 2 cents, because gas tax is really the user tax that pays for this. People will be able to, in their own minds, make up their minds this coming November 8th or in early voting as to whether they want to go for the 3 cents. I don't like the way the legislature structured it with a 10-year imposition until it gets a revote. But nevertheless, unlike some other people at this table, I don't quarrel with the funding mechanisms that the funding has to be found, because that's letting the good be killed by the perfect.
Okay, next up, Brad.
Okay, roads and infrastructure in parts of downtown have been completed. South Carson Street has been repaved by NDOT. We're looking rather prosperous. First, South Carson Street was not repaved by NDOT. They did some minor repairs. The second phase of the corridor improvements would cover South Carson Street, and at that point, it would be rebuilt and repaved, including replacing water and sewer lines, relocating utility lines, adding ADA sidewalks, improved street crossings for pedestrian safety, and improved lighting. And those corridor improvements will cover all of Carson Street and all of William Street out to past the freeway by the time we're done with the final phase. So that will take care of a lot of the old infrastructure on our commercial corridors, but there's also a lot of deferred maintenance on our infrastructure throughout town, and so that's another issue that we would have to cover. The 1/8 cent sales tax covers the commercial corridor improvements. For the roads, if the gas tax is defeated, how will we fund that? The truth is we won't. The numbers are way too big. So we'll continue, as I said earlier, with business as usual, where we'll spend our $1 to $1.5 million a year that we have available to try to maintain and repair the roads, when we need many millions of dollars just to do basic maintenance, and we need between 90 and 100 million to bring the roads back to an acceptable level now. So we're having 2 different conversations. We're having a conversation over, a couple $100,000 a year to try to scrape together to maintain the roads. And the real conversation that we should be having is, how do we come up with $100 million to bring our roads back to the point to where maintenance would actually do some good? So I'll just end right there because that's so cheerful.
Okay, next, Jim.
The roads and streets, they are in dire need of repair. But if you look back at the history, there is nothing there that presents itself that we've actually looked at this and brought it to discussion to look for ways to improve our roads. We have the Regional Transportation Committee, which has 5 members. Out of those 5 members, 2 are Board of Supervisors. And if you look at what's come through that committee, the repair of recently of Colorado Street, that was just done because someone came, a citizen came, complained, they had meetings at their house on the street, and repairs were made. I think the Regional Transportation Committee should consist of a citizen from each ward so that you're represented where you live, can actually have a discussion about streets in your ward. The 2 board members can still sit there. I don't think they should be voting members. And then we could have 1 citizen at large. This needs to change because the way we're presented issues at the Regional Transportation Committee, I think is illogical. You have no representation there from your ward, and we're in dire need of representation of your ward. I had citizens from Ward 4 put a petition, and we got some action done. Also, the underground utilities in all these corridors, regardless if we're narrowing the street or not, they have to be replaced. At any time, we do not have to say, well, we can't do it until we narrow the street. Downtown utilities should have been replaced years ago. I mean, you saw the pictures of them coming out, so why weren't they replaced years ago? That's a question we need to ask staff. Where is the committee, or where is the discussion as to how we can better utilizing our funds and how we move forward? Presently, the gas tax indexing is going to bring possibly a lot of money, but if you go to other communities.
Sorry, that would be 2 minutes. I guess I'm the heavy today.
You're the heavy. You're the heavy.
All right, next up, Chris.
So I've talked about this several times. This is the infamous Plan B that's been missing. What happens if we don't get the tax money? And the fact that we're having that discussion this late in our cycle means that we have not planned well. So what can we do? Since Carson City likes to manage by crisis, let's focus this first on health and safety issues. If a road is unsafe, has to do with accessibility to emergency services, ability to get to and from work, et cetera, then we need to address those first. And there's money, I think, excess in our revenue that we need to look at first before we start talking about another tax. We do need to find out specifically where all the tax revenue is going, and I think that Mr. Ronkowski is wrong, that the discussion is about where that money goes. We have over $2 million going to streets and roads with 21 employees, and yet we can't account for that or the tax money that's generated from the current fuels tax. We need to focus on projected taxpayers, what businesses and developments will promote putting property onto the tax rolls and get those roads fixed so we have a healthy infrastructure. Nobody comes here and stays here because we have chewed up roads. They come and stay because we take care of what we have. And we are talking about deferred maintenance. This is not something that occurred yesterday. It has occurred over the course of years through neglect by city government. So we need to do the right thing and fix it. Thank you.
Okay, and next is Bob.
Well, let me talk about deferred maintenance first as a general rule. Our Public Works Department in the water and sewer areas has implemented a fairly good asset management system that prioritizes maintenance on a per item basis. We are in the process of expanding that throughout the city so that the entire city will be on an asset management system so we can prioritize maintenance with the limited dollars we have to deal with deferred maintenance. On roads, somewhere there has to be a guaranteed, there has to be a revenue stream dedicated to roads. Roads have historically been financed by gas tax, not general fund, and that's what a lot of folks up here will be talking about, taking money from the general fund. The general fund funds courts, parks, fire, cops, and general admin things. Road gas taxes, I drive a hybrid. Gas taxes peaked in 2006 with $3.47 million. This year alone, we think it's going to come out to be $3.37 million, which doesn't even meet what we had in 2006. It's not necessarily something that is unique to Carson City. It's unique to every community. If the 3-cent gas tax indexing doesn't happen, we're just going to have to pull up our belt straps and do what we can. But we've taken $370,000 last year out of the general fund and put it into roads. But the general fund is a zero-sum game. Every time you take a dollar out of the general fund, you're taking a potential dollar out of cops and fire or courts or parks. We have implemented about 5 years ago, we developed a pavement management system developed by the University of Nevada that gives us a good guideline on what roads need to be maintained. And so we use that as a guideline right now on where to spend road tax money that we have. Also, we have created a traffic citizens committee that looks at available resources.
2 minutes.
Done.
Thank you.
That's it for question number 4. Over to Bob.
Thank you very much. We're going on to question number 5. So here it is. With population growth comes many opportunities and challenges. Do you feel this city has adequately planned for the coming growth that currently includes approximately 1,300 new living units now in various forms of planning and/or construction? This total does not take into account the proposed Lone Ranch development. Do we have the necessary revenues to fund new schools, public safety, social services, medical facilities, provide water, sewer, and possible expansion of the water treatment plant, and similar infrastructure needs that may arise due to growth? Please explain. And we will start with Chris.
Can you repeat the question? No, I'm just joking.
Tomorrow.
So the answer is no. We all know that. We don't have enough money to do this. We've looked at each development as it's come before the board, where we've seen fire and sheriff talk about they're overcommitted. We've seen the school board say that they can meet capacity, but then the board comes back and says that they need to build, either put additions or build new schools to accommodate the potential growth. So when we talk about the other things like expanded capability on our water and sewer, expanded capability on our traffic, on our roads, especially those that feed these new communities, I don't think that we're doing the right thing in terms of planning. We're not looking at two things: the cost and benefit analysis of those types of developments, especially the high-density ones, and the secondary impacts that are imposed because we build things like commercial care or commercial activity in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So the short answer is no. The long answer is that we need to step back and take a look at the long-range effect, and before we say yes, we need to understand where that money is going to come from. And 100% of the time of the issues that I've looked at, we don't. We say yes first, and then we try to figure out how to pay for it. And if you run a household like I do, then you know that that's not the answer to a city budget, and certainly not the answer to where our growth goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Brad, please.
So I think that the answer to accommodating new growth is that we're pretty well set on some items, and on others we're not. Water and sewer, I think, as you've heard today, we are in pretty good shape, although we will continue to need to make improvements as we build out the valley. Where I see the real issues coming up will be with schools and fire, secondarily police. I think fire is a bigger issue because we already rely on an interlocal agreement with Lyon County and Douglas County to help cover some of our existing calls. We have a growth management ordinance in place, so runaway growth is not a possibility in Carson City. We're limited to 3% growth per year, so that helps us manage our growth. Carson City's done a good job. A lot of people may not want to believe that, but we've done a good job. That doesn't mean we're perfect, and that doesn't mean that we won't have issues that we have to address. But we're in much better shape than almost all other counties in the state, in most areas. We have the best schools in the state. We talked about water rights. Candidates, especially when you're running for election, you've got to address issues that are not immediately solvable, and that's how you run. We manage things to the best of our ability. Running a city government takes money, takes a lot of money, and you have to balance that against how much money you want to raise, because that's taxes that each one of you have to pay. So we're always trying to balance the priority of services against the amount of money that we're going to raise to run the city.
That would be 2 minutes. Goes by rather quickly, I'm afraid. Next, same question, Bob.
Well, here's a startling little fact. 2 years ago, I attended the Governor's Summit on Housing in Northern Nevada with the advent of Tesla, and the projection is that Northern Nevada will need, in the coming years, but 5-10 years, will need 2 Carson cities worth of housing units. That's over 40,000 units of residential units just in Northern Nevada. That's starting to happen, and I think that Carson City is uniquely prepared to, from the city standpoint, uniquely prepared to undertake the type of growth that's going to happen. One, we know, as Supervisor Bankowski mentioned, we know through our growth management ordinance what our utilities, what our resources can take, and how we can use those every year. And by the way, every year when the growth management ordinance is reviewed, we do look at schools, cops, fire. Every city department does the whole thing to determine whether or not and what type of units we can have for the next year following, and that's done. And we have never yet, in the history of that ordinance, which was put in 1979 by someone a lot smarter than I, we've never yet met the growth allowances allowed by the growth management ordinance through its history. I think that we need to keep our eye on the ball, though, when we look at sustainable development, that we make sure that we don't overlook the need for affordable housing in our community, because I think that that's a good part of how sustainable communities survive over time. To a large part, what's happening in Carson City, when I was first mayor, the recession hit, we were at about 55,000 people. I haven't seen a new census yet, but we're now coming back, although that may, to a lot of us, it seems like there's a whole lot of development going on. I'll just remind everybody that we do indeed have a growth management ordinance in place that tells us what we can grow to if the resources hold out, and how we can grow on a level basis every year.
That would be 2 minutes.
Finished.
Thank you. Next, John.
Thank you. The answer to the heart of this question is yes, the city has adequately planned. Has it planned in every facet that it could have? Well, we just went through the recession that the mayor talked about, so we don't have the money to plan for everything, although we can look ahead and make sure we're doing the best we can. Water, sewer, yes, and the rates for growth are built into that in terms of paying for the maintenance going forward. One of the real problems of the sewage and water was that we didn't fix it when it was supposed to be fixed, and it was left to this board to come up with the money. They got 4 votes were profiling courage, in my estimation. The truth of the matter is, it had to be done. We could face a $50,000 fine for the federal government if our sewage treatment plant failed and we had to discharge into the river. We'll never be allowed to do that. We haven't planned as well as we could have in streets, but as has been said here, the truth of the matter is that's mostly funded by a user tax. That user tax has not been increased in this city for 19 years, and it has been increased federally for 25. They're struggling with that. We can do better, but this city has done pretty well, and I've been there to watch it as it came. The 1,300 units plus actually won't come in tomorrow. They won't come in next year. Some of them will. They'll trickle in over the next decade, is the truth. And we can handle it. Growth won't pay for itself, but it sure will help the tax receipts go up. That's enough.
Thank you very much. Jim.
Growth. Some like it, some don't. So it's a quagmire. As to the sewer and water rates, what John mentioned, the vote, I brought other alternatives forward to hold those rates reasonably. I didn't get a second on that, but I did make motions and bring solutions to the table. I can't be singled out for having the courage to vote the proper way. As to how we can move forward, I think the first thing we have to do as a board member, if we see problems, I think we should be able to have an agenda, an agenda item, so we can talk about the possibility of how we can find solutions to problems that are in our ward or brought to us by citizens. Right now, we can't do anything unless we get a second. Then we can have an agenda item. I believe as an elected official representing you, the citizens, I should have the ability to have an agenda item once a quarter so I can talk about things and bring those forward so we can have a discussion. How we move forward is very important because we have numerous projects coming forward there's going to be changing this community overnight. Look at the Vintage Project, which is coming forward. That is going to change who we are and what we do. It's going to bring a lot of different perspectives here. Whether that goes through or not, I don't know. But we need to look at public safety, social services. The sheriff and fire department are having trouble now getting out there. We need to have the medical facilities to accommodate those individuals who may be hurt and those individuals who need help, such as our homeless and our veterans in our community. It is much needed. And how we move forward is, if you look back, how we move forward from the past is not how we need to move forward from today, because we let the water and sewer rates diminish, then we used all the reserve, and then we raised them. We cannot continue this path
That
of...
would be 2 minutes, I'm sorry. Same question, Maurice.
Do we have the necessary revenues? Today, no. But those revenues come along with the growth. Can we be ready? Absolutely, we can be ready for when these needs come about. And we have to do that through a very thoughtful process that includes homeowners and developers, because everybody deserves to have some predictability in what land use is going to be. I think we could move a long ways in being prepared for this kind of growth if we do two things. One of those is reduce that 3% to some other more reasonable level and set that trajectory towards what the state demographer says our growth should be. The state demographer says we should not reach our population maximum until about 2065. The second part of the proposal would be, let's take a look at how Douglas County does their developments. They make the developer put in the schools, the sewer, and all of those things before they even start building the houses. I think being in front of the need is where we need to plan, and I think we can do it. We have a great example from our neighbors to the south.
Thank you. That concludes the answer for question 5. I'll toss it over to my partner, Kirk.
Okay, I have the 6th and final question. And to end on a lighter note, we'd like to commend each of you on the way you run your respective campaigns. You have maintained a high road throughout. Taking a page out of the recent presidential debate, give us one comment on why you respect your opponent. And we will start with Jim.
The one question I go first on, this one. The one comment on why you respect your opponent. Well, I gotta admit, you know, what's that bag you wear around your waist? What's that called? What's that? Fanny pack. I think anybody that wears a fanny pack has got to have a lot of courage, because I just could not see myself wearing a fanny pack. So taking the high road, congratulations. I think you may be setting a trend on the fanny pack.
Okay, next, John.
Thank you, Jim. I do think I have a lot of courage, not just because I wear a fanny pack. Regarding Jim, he's the best dancer on the current board, and he proved it. Very good dancer. Won an award. I believe Stacy Jomey was at that when he won that award. So I admire his dancing capabilities, and that probably took some courage too.
Well, let me say this to my opponent, Chris, welcome home. We're both veterans. He happens to be a veteran from the Army. I happen to be a retired, we're both, I think, retired out of the Navy. So, Chris, on behalf of all of us veterans, thank you for your service, and thank you more importantly for your sacrifice, and welcome home.
Next, Brad.
Oh, this one's easy. It's definitely the ponytail. So in this race, you get a choice between a ponytail and an earring. So, no, in all seriousness, I respect Morris. This is the second time that we've actually run against each other, and we have had a very respectful and positive campaign both times, and I truly appreciate that.
All right, next, Chris.
I think it's clear that my opponent, our mayor, is probably one of the most gregarious and outgoing individuals in politics, especially on the local scene. It goes without saying that when Bob speaks, he speaks to all of us and speaks kindly. And I appreciate the fact that we're both veterans, and I think that raises the bar for both of us, and I'm glad to compete against somebody of that caliber.
All right, and finally, Maurice.
So actually, you could have the best of the both worlds right here. I used to wear an earring until I lost it, and I haven't found one suits my personality. When I do, I'll be ponytail and earring. This is about me. So I don't think there is any doubt whatsoever that Brad should be respected for his energetic and successful business that he runs. There's no doubt.
All right, and with that, it is now 1:03. We were going to keep this to an hour, but if you guys have a moment and if you want to stay, I will entertain one or two questions from anybody out there who has a burning question. Does anybody have a burning question that may not have been covered? And you do? And again, I want to make sure that this is something that is not currently before the Board of Supervisors. So it is not a decision. Okay, go ahead. Maxine?
I'd like to know, since being a public servant is probably not what really pays the mortgage, I'd like to know whether you consider yourself first a supervisor / mayor, or whether you consider yourself first a business person.
Okay, I think we'll start off with Jim on the way through and then just go down.
My full-time position is Board of Supervisors. That's what I do. I'm dedicated to that position. I've done it for 4 years. I do nothing else but do this.
All right, thank you, Jim. John?
I've been an entrepreneur all my life because you sell your skills in the free marketplace, and the free marketplace of ideas. I did that. I still do it as a researcher writer, but I will be a full-time Board of Supervisors because I'm semi-retired. I guess given what I used to do, that makes me a half-wit. I don't know.
Okay. Maurice?
So I'm a retired diesel mechanic with a very diverse background in the public and private sector. At this point, being retired, I don't have another job. This will be my full-time job.
Brad?
It's a very interesting question. As you all know, I've been a business person here in the city for 30-plus years. But I don't think that anybody can accuse me of ever being unprepared or not being knowledgeable on any subject that comes up in front of the Board of Supervisors. I give it 110%. So therefore, I'm going to say that I'm both.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm probably both too. You know, I've spent the last 17 years of my life both being a business person here in Carson City and around the state, and also being either on the school board or on the Board of Supervisors. And I'm now retired. But I see both of them, you know, at the end of the day, I grew up in this community. I don't look at it as a question of whether I'm a business person or a board member. I'm a citizen of this community, and I want to see it do the best it can be. I want to see it be what all that the state is going to be when as we move into the 21st century. That's from me as a citizen growing up here. And I really don't look at it in terms of occupation. I mean, we don't do these things to get paid. So, you know, from my standpoint, my only goal, the only dog I have in this fight is to hopefully leave behind what I found just a little bit better so that our kids, our grandkids can have a wonderful quality of life that I've had.
Okay, Chris?
I have 35 years of service to the nation, and that's the only job that I've ever had. Except for now, I serve my beautiful wife, Lori, who is helping me with this campaign. So I don't have a business. I don't have any other interests other than serving the public, which I am a part of. I don't consider myself in any way distanced from that or have any interests, and I serve my wife. Thank you.
Serves his wife. Well, how about that? Okay. All right. John, I hope you are listening. I hope you are listening. All right.
That answer was, what, yeah.
All right. I think that we will conclude with that. That was a good question, Maxine. Thank you. And thank you guys all. I don't see a woman here, unfortunately, but thank you guys all. You've been great. So enjoy.
If we could